So when we look at discriminant learning, we start there because we're not always sure of their social emotional age. So that's where we start. And then we can move from there. The Scarborough Principle looks at, we can start with the concept. And in this case, they say it might be menstruation. And so it begins with self-care. And basically trying not to show people your pads at school because now you're menstruating. Because sometimes that happens too. And then from there, some individuals will they'll just take training. So they'll learn through behavior modification how to be appropriate with changing their pads and everything, and they may never understand how that's happening, and they don't need to. If they don't have the ability to understand, what they can do is take care of their hygiene and to be able to change their pads. And then there are those that can take it a bit further. They want the biological explanation. And then there are those that will want to take it even further and look at the social implications. But that will depend on the individual. And some will be able to completely understand all the social implications and everything, like intellectually, but emotionally, socially, they don't really understand any of it. So don't assume comprehension. Level 2 is hygiene, which is an interesting one. Cleaning properly, going to the bathroom, hygiene during periods, changing underwear. You know, when I tell them underwear marathons are over, you can't wear the same one for 7 days anymore. Right? Talk about socks, things like that. And so here's a lady giving instruction to a girl with challenges about hygiene. So in that case, they're not going to go into biological explanations because he doesn't need that. But he can learn how to clean up. And you could tell, felt like a natural process. The way the educator was with him was like, this happens, and you're right on track. But you'll notice, so they're living in a residential environment. That's a counselor speaking to them. Our children aren't in residential environments. So who's having that conversation now? Is it the parent? Is it the sociosexual educator? Is it the speech and language pathologist? Is it the classroom teacher? Who's having the conversation? And where is the training coming from for that conversation? And that's the gap we're in. So hygiene, there are 16 steps to showering. And that doesn't include brushing your teeth, combing your hair, fingernails, deodorant, putting your clothes on. 16 steps to showering, alone. And sometimes what it looks like is the first time they shower, go in, the water's on, turn the water off, leave. That's showering, step 1. Second time it might be, well, maybe you could wash your face. Oh, I don't like water on my face. What about your swimming goggles? If you put your swimming goggles on, do you think you could wash your face? Yeah, I think I could. So that's second step. Goggles on, in, face, out. And we build. And we build. And sometimes you have to actually put it into a plan, like what's a favorite activity before the shower, and then what's a favorite activity after, and it's got to be fit in. And what happens is we might be prompting them first. And then eventually, ideally, we can put a list like this up, and they're watching it, and we're pointing to it as they're doing it, and we're still there as a prompt. But ideally, eventually, we leave, and they follow that list. And we are no longer required there for them to be showering. We might still be prompting what days until they get to the point where they realize every day is a good idea, like that. And that's just hygiene. And sometimes I got to the point with my boys and I said, I'm tired of this. You know what? I'm not going to protect you from this society anymore. I'm not going to say if you stink. I'm going to let people out there tell you. I'm done. They showered. The thought of a neighbor or a teacher or a peer saying, you smell. They didn't like that idea. And so I stopped saying it, and they started showering. I didn't know that would happen. They could have gone and had 20 people tell them they stink and come home and been completely depressed and not want to go out. It's risky. I didn't know what would happen. They chose to shower. I was grateful. So, if we're going to talk about bodies and why they need to be clean and protect them, then at some point we're going to have to use the vocabulary. This is tricky, but we need to be able to use it. And there's all kinds of different vocabulary. There's the technical language, and then there's the formal and the cute and the slang, and lots of different language. But at some point we need to learn to say these words. So I believe this video is going to show you how to do that. And if you want to join in, go right ahead. So when it comes to hygiene, when I work with individuals who are neurodiverse, I start with children. It's a little bit much for them to see adults first. So I usually say, let's just start at the beginning where we came from. And let's just look at kids first. And so we start with babies, and I ask them what the difference is between these two. And then the other thing I ask them is, what's missing on the boy's body? Nipples. Yes. Often they can't see that. And that tells me that how they see and are scanning, they're missing things. They're not seeing what you and I may be seeing from a neurotypical view. So we talk about the body, and who's cleaning these children's bodies? Yes, their parents. Because the rule I want to get, the deal I want to get through to them is they're at an age where their parents have retired from cleaning their bodies. And it's who's going to take care of it now? And they kind of look at me like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, it's private, but it's not private to you. That's why I say, don't assume that they know all this. And they go, oh, because it's private, so they don't think they should touch it either, even though it's theirs. Because it's private. It's not private to you. Oh, and you can clean it. Oh, they're so cute. So when we look at good hygiene now, these line drawings, there are some that this wouldn't work, because they wouldn't get that these are real people. And so this just shows them how to clean the odor-causing areas, because we said showering has 16 steps. So this just shows some of the steps that they leave behind. So that's hygiene. That was first level, discriminant learning. Second, hygiene. Third, body parts and functions. Some of our individuals can understand this, some can't, and they don't need to. So what's the language around functioning and how bodies work? And we want to introduce concepts, because if they learn about their bodies, they tend to take better care of them. And there are some great books that talk about bodies and body science. And What's the Big Secret is created by Laurie and Mark Brown. They do the Franklin books, I believe. Arthur books. Thank you very much. My kids are 21 and 23. I'm allowed to make that mistake. Okay, so they do the Arthur books. And the Meg Hickling book for boys, girls, and body science is really, really good. I like it because it also puts in some natural rules around things like you don't ever have to have sex if you don't want to. Like, it talks a little bit about reproduction, and that, and it's great that she puts it in, and that sex is for adults. Little pieces like that that really help with putting in rules that help with navigating development. And in her book, these are some of her pictures of children. So this one, of course, shows the male. It shows the urethra and the bladder. This one shows the testicles, the scrotum, and it shows the tubes that come up to the, and meet and go out the urethra. So they're great ones. The kids can usually deal with these quite well, because they're not, they don't upset them. The penis is really little, things like that. It doesn't equate to pornography, which is kind of great. They can't even compare it, actually, which kind of keeps us out of that realm. This, of course, shows an adult, and it shows some of the parts that come with an adult. If we had more time, I'd tell you the conversation I have with them. I'll give you just a little piece so you can participate. It goes like this. So when a baby boy is born, we go, oh, it's a boy. What does the boy have? What does the boy have? How do we know it's a boy? The boy has a penis. Yes, and at the end of the penis, there's a piece of skin that's there when they're born that may or may not be removed. What's it called? And there's a white fluid underneath the foreskin that likes to collect there. It helps to moisturize so that the foreskin can move back and forth. Does anybody know what it's called? It starts with an S. Smegma, very good. And bacteria like smegma. Smegma So because the bacteria like to live in the smegma, if we don't pull the foreskin back and wash underneath, then it can get itchy, it can get red, it can get sore, and they can get infection. So it's important to wash underneath. So already they're learning to pull back a little bit. And we tell them, like not to pull too much, depending on the, usually they're in puberty when we have this conversation, or heading into puberty. Great. The other thing we know about the penis is that it likes to exercise. Up, down, up, down. When you're reading, you're sleeping, you're not even thinking about anything. It likes to exercise. That's healthy, normal, and natural. And nobody knows if you have an erection unless you tell them, but it's private. Or you wear sweatpants with no underwear, or a Speedo bathing suit. And some people wonder, well, how do you make it go away? And some of us say, just relax and enjoy it. But don't let anybody know you're enjoying it. And the other way, you can think about something boring if you want. That can help. Then you get them saying things like, you mean like my grandma naked? And we're like, too much information. Right? They say things like that, right? So that they're learning that it's natural and it's normal and it's healthy. And then we say there's wrinkled skin just below the penis. What's it called? The wrinkled skin is called? And what's inside? Testicles make two things. What are they? Very good. So that's the kind of conversation we have with the children's pictures, and Meg Hickling's book is really helpful with that. And of course, some of them think this is a moose head when they first see it, because that's what it looks like. There can't possibly be one of those in a woman's body. So then we talk about girls and what they have in their bodies, and we look at that boys have 2 openings between their legs, girls have 3. Boys have the opening called the urethra, that the urine comes out of and the sperm, and they have the anus that the stool comes from. Girls have 3. They have the urethra that the urine comes from, they have the anus that the stools comes from, and in the middle they have a 3rd opening called the vagina, which leads to the uterus. It's not an endless tunnel. Got to put some humor in, right? But what's so great about this picture is so often I get the question, can you wear a tampon and still urinate? So when I show them this picture and point to the screen on where the tampon goes, they can tell. Then I ask them the question, can a woman urinate when she's wearing a tampon? And they can actually look at it and look and think and say, yes. Now I know they're comprehending me. Because they took all that information, the pictures, what I said, formulated it all into an answer to a question in real time. Don't take that for granted. That's amazing. And you and I don't know how much energy that took. So that's why sometimes our kids melt down at 2 hours into the day, because we don't know how many steps they navigated to do that skill. And of course, it shows the adult one. So that's level 3. And books are really great for that. I say to people, we can give them a book, we can give them an iPad app, we can give them a computer. Doesn't matter how much of that we give, none of it replaces dialogue, ever, at this point in the world of technology. None of it replaces dialogue. So it can never be given in the place of dialogue. Okay? It can be a tool for them to gain comprehension about something, but then we need to test it in real time. Level 4, comprehensive sexuality education. This is where we have to make sure we don't get trapped in our own preconceptions. They like role-playing. Neurotypical kids, not so much. They like role-playing. Teaches them how to deal with things and how to trade information. So sometimes the dictionary specialist in the classroom who has a hard time being calm in the classroom, I give them the dictionary. And when we get to certain words in the content, I ask them to look it up. And that student is on task and engaged the whole time because they're masterful with the dictionary, like that. Sometimes another one runs my PowerPoint for me because they're a master with electronics. And it's hard to sit still. And so as soon as I go, oh, what happened? They're right here. I go, thank you. Would you like to run it for me for the rest of the session? And now that person, because they're doing something that has engaged them, now they're also tuned into the content. So how do we draw them in? So computers might be a restricted, repetitive interest for that individual, but now it's become a reciprocal interaction where he is being a mentor of me. We completely shifted it. And how that promotes his self-esteem is so amazing. Yes?
I don't know if you're going to comment this later on, but when you have a large class with both genders in it, at what point would you split them
I never split them.
You never split them? Never come
I'll tell you why I don't. There's no other, thank you for the question. The question was, when do you split the boys and the girls? I don't ever split them. However, I'm very comfortable with the topic and the range of genders. No other topic in the curriculum teaches and splits people based on gender. Okay? We don't do it in math, we don't do it in English, we don't do it in socials. So it actually, from a human rights perspective, it's actually not appropriate. From a human rights perspective. Now that doesn't mean we don't do it to cope in classrooms. If the students say to me, we want to have a separate class, girls and boys, then I split it. Because they acknowledge it as a learning need. And I'm going to acknowledge their learning needs. But otherwise I don't split it, because they learn things in real time and they learn to understand one another. Here's an example. Grade 6 classroom, we're talking about menstruation. We've got girls and boys in there. But instead of asking the girls all the questions, now I'm also asking the boys. And I said to the guys, so you guys might be at an age where you get to look after a younger sibling or cousin or something, maybe female. Some girls are as young as 8 years old when they start menstruating. Some are 9, that's considered normal today. If they're under 8, we intervene, but otherwise we don't intervene. So they might be with you, and the parents might be working, and maybe you're 12, and maybe they're 9. And all of a sudden they come to you and they go, no, what's this? I have some red stuff on my pants. What are you going to do, guys? Newspaper, something a little softer. Paper towel, softer than that. It's so great. And so then they go, oh, maybe Kleenex, yeah, or toilet paper, yeah. So we talk about that. They can cover the spot until, and then what do you need to go get? And then that's when we brought out the pads, right? Now, I don't just talk about pads, I will bring them out, because don't assume they know what we're talking about. Because on TV, these things soak up blue fluid and they have wings so they can fly. You get it? So we can't depend on the media. So then I show them, and I take it out, and they go, oh, that's what those are. Because don't forget, there are men single-handedly parenting daughters today. And there are women single-handedly parenting sons. Everybody needs the information. And that's what I tell them. And so I show it to them, and here's the wings that can fly, and they laugh because they're like, oh, for Pete's sake, right? So we have the conversation. Boy puts up his hand. Yes? He's 13, 12. He says, my parents are divorced. We have 2 different homes. We spend some time at my mom's home and sometimes at my dad's home. I have a little sister who's 9. And I know my mom has those things in her cupboard. He said, do you think it would be okay if I asked my mom if I could take some of those to my dad's house so that if my sister starts her period, there's some at my dad's house? I said, I think that would be okay. So that's the value of real time and genders together and appreciation of one another. That's the value. And I see it even in my boys when I say, is this person coming tonight to hang out? No, they're like 17. No, she's got her period and she's kind of has some cramps, so she's just going to stay home and rest tonight. Right out of their mouths. And I'm like, wow, this is a different world. Confident as anything, because they appreciate all of it. So that's why I keep them together. Depending on your comfort level, you may want to separate them. But here's the bottom line. If we separate them, we want to make sure that both get the same information. The boys get the questions the girls ask, the girls get the questions the boys ask, and they both get the same information. Otherwise, we set up this mystery that doesn't actually help us in the end because it's brought secrecy back. And so we've got pieces that are cloaked in secrecy that one can't know about the other, and now we've kind of brought a bit of the mischief back. So that's the challenge of separating them. And if it's a comfort, then it's better than nothing. But I don't separate them. Thanks for the question.